Thank you, Mr. Roth, for joining us on Bloomberg Quint.
It's a pleasure. Nice to be with you.
Yeah. This year's top 10 list, we've seen LIC and TCS, enter the top 10. In fact, they weren't there earlier. They're two new entrants in this list. So what is the reason behind that, and how did they just zoom into these top two into number 2 and 3?
Well, this is the 5th year that we've done the rankings, and I suppose to celebrate that, and also, more importantly, as a reflection of changing India and changing consumer requirements and the way in which people are spending their disposable income, we've increased the number of brands in the rankings from 50 brands to 75 brands. And that's allowed us to look at more companies, but more importantly, more sectors. And that's the principal reason why these two brands, in a sense, have come from nowhere, although they were clearly big brands beforehand, and now in the top 75 most valuable brands, the Indian brands for 2018.
Okay, but we've also seen the top 10, upset quite a bit. We've seen Jio at number 10. That wasn't the case last year. So do you think it will climb higher from, is there a possibility for it to move higher and also upset the existing list? Because brands have actually typically moved down from, their rankings last year.
Yeah, I think we're beginning to see a reflection of what we see in other markets around the world where we're doing the brand rankings for a longer period of time, that some of the established brands are being very much challenged by some of the newcomers, some brands who are embracing technology at a faster sort of rate, are more in keeping with a younger, more technically savvy digital generation. To give you an example, when we started doing brand rankings in China 8 years ago now, I think pretty much the entire top 10 was dominated by financial institutions. Today, the ranking is dominated by the likes of Alibaba, Tencent, Baidu, JD.com, internet brands, market-driven brands that really were nowhere 8 years ago.
So do we see technology brands also featuring into the top 10 and, actually upsetting, because largely they're all financial institutions which are in the top 10 even in India. In fact, our number one stays, HDFC. Now, how have they managed to be there, and do you see that upsetting anytime soon, any technology brand that will actually take the number one spot?
Well, I will never say never. But I think HDFC needs to be congratulated because they occupy a very, very unique space, not just clearly here in India, where they've been the number one brand since the ranking started. But actually, when you look at the way in which the consumer sees HDFC, they see it unbelievably positively. They see them as innovators. They see them as helpful, enabling people to help and improve their lives. And that's not a position that we see banks around the world being perceived by their consumers. Now, I think what we will undoubtedly see in India, if I had a crystal ball and we'll be able to predict 10 years into the future, I'm sure that we will see more technology brands both enter the rankings and into the top 10. But here's the caveat, not at the rate I think that we've seen that in both China and also in the global rankings as well. And I think that actually India has been slow off the blocks in terms of creating very strong technology brands, and those brands being able to become global brands as opposed to just national brands.
Okay, you just mentioned that consumer demands are evolving. What is it now that the Indian consumer really wants out of a brand that's actually distinctive in the last few years, or probably this year, that has actually even caused the rankings to change?
I would say probably two things. One, it's always been like that, but more heightened, and that is trust. And we're seeing that those brands that are increasing the amount of trust that their consumers have in them have actually increased their brand valuation at a faster rate. And I think that's going to be important going on to the future. And the second is, I suppose, the way in which technology is being used within that proposition. Now, obviously, we're not valuing technology as a separate entity in the brand, but we do know from our rankings around the world that those brands that are seen as innovative by their consumers grow on average a rate of 7 times faster than those brands that don't. So I think it's very important, even if you're not a technology brand, to be looking at how technology is going to create a better customer experience and much more engaged customers.
Okay. Thank you so much for speaking to us at Bloomberg Quiz.
That's a pleasure. Thank you very much
Thank you
indeed.
so much.